Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda is Resolution 2019-6, apply for Community Revitalization Tax Relief Program, RSA 79-E, Goddard Block 54-62 Pleasant Street. This is slated for a public hearing.
So you've got a memo in your
Just
packet.
a minute, Director Merrill.
Yeah.
Just for everybody to be at it's at part 2 of your packet, page 74. Is that right? Yeah. So you have to go to part 2.
I don't know that you really have many questions for me. Mr. Lacasse is here. You probably have more questions for him. But I just put a short memo on the front, just sort of reminding you about that you do need to determine a public benefit, which is in your resolution. But the law requires that you have to set forth what are more public benefits. So page 2 of my memo has the 5 criteria.
Yeah.
And I can hand it over to Kevin. And
Before you do, one question. It says in the resolution that the council can provide up to 5 years with an additional 4 years. The RSA speaks to why up to 4 years. And with that, is the reason that we're saying up to 4 years in this resolution because of 2 things? Affordable housing plus it's in a historic district?
I think that the resolution is for 5 years. I don't think that we put in the resolution the additional 4, did we?
I have to get to that section.
I don't think so.
Does anybody have the resolution up?
It says 5 years.
But the RSA does allow for that, correct?
It allows for it. Your motion is for 5. The RSA allows for it. The others that you've done, the 2 other 79Es you've done have been 5 years.
Okay, Mr. Lacasse?
Nice seeing you guys all again tonight. I don't really have a formal presentation to offer on this application, but I did want to be here to answer any questions and to kind of give you an update as to where we are in the process and what our expected start date would be. So basically, from a funding standpoint, everything has been approved. We haven't closed on the construction loan process yet. We've got to get through the bidding process, which we're in the process of doing now. We're just wrapping up and completing the last of the architectural plans. We have all the structural, MEP, all those plans set forth, and Trumbull Nelson has been selected as our contractor for the project, and they have started the bidding process. We expect to get bids back within the next 3 weeks and come up with what's called a GMP, gross maximum price for construction, by the end of August, and we're targeting to close on September 18th and move forward with construction as soon as possible after that. So, you know, probably the end of September by the time we start mobilizing and getting construction moving forward. So
How long do you anticipate the project to take?
construction should take 15 months. Yeah. We were hoping a year, but the structural reports came back and there's quite a bit of structural pieces that have to go in. You know, just the steel component is going to be somewhere around $500,000. So because of the extents of the structural components of the project, that's kind of what added on. Because originally we were thinking it would be about 12 months, but because of those added things, it's kind of added a few months to the project.
Okay. Well, it's a big project. Any questions from the council? No? Just for clarity, in your application, it didn't specify the number of years that you were applying for, but it is in our resolution for 5 years. Is that what you wanted?
That is something that we did discuss with Mr. McNutt and Ms. Merrill. So yeah, that is what we're applying for. Obviously, if the city council sees fit to allow for the additional 4 years, we would certainly be accepting of that, but that isn't something we were outright requesting.
I have a legal question. It says in the RSA that at the council's discretion, up to additional 4 years, if those two caveats do apply, because consider this affordable housing, correct?
Yeah, it is an affordable housing and, in accordance with the definition of affordable housing. And there is a tax credit piece to it, so from a historic standpoint, it would certainly qualify from that aspect as well.
Okay. So would it, on a legal note, would we, if we were to approve this resolution this evening, and the council thought to add an additional 4 years based on the project and how well things are going, is that within our purview to do it at a later date? Or does it have to be captured in this resolution?
I think I would do it in a resolution before construction began on the project, because that's when it has to be, that's when the taxes are
So are you
abated.
advising that if we were to add that into this resolution, that we should do so tonight?
That's what I would recommend. I just want to say, when the council adopted this 79E in 2016, you adopted it and implemented the provisions with certain modifications as follows. And the housing expansion of the tax credit for housing is not in here. It says, as well as an additional period of up to 4 years at the council's discretion for the substantial rehabilitation of a qualifying structure that is listed on or determined eligible for listing on the National Register. Just as a heads up, it does not look like that you adopted the housing, additional 4 years for housing.
Even though the RSA says it could be.
RSA says that you can, but when the motion says implements with a certain modifications as follows, and we changed, for example, the amount of money that somebody had to put into a building.
Right.
And it appears that also the additional 4 years was limited to historic
But this isn't a historic district.
I'll let Kevin speak to that.
The building has been selected to be on the National Register. That's actually one of the requirements for the historic tax credits that we're getting. We went through what's called a Part 1, which is submitted to New Hampshire DHR. They review it, and then they actually send it down to the Park Services in DC for their review. And they did accept the Part 1, as being allowed to be in the historic register. And we are now, that's one of the last pieces we're waiting on to do the construction closing too, is the submittal of the Part 2. And what the Part 2 does is basically goes over what we are doing for renovations and upgrades and so forth, because they have to approve, like window changes and all kinds of stuff. I mean, there's quite a bit to it. We have consulted with New Hampshire DHR several times and have gone back and forth, and actually the application for the Part 2 is going out on Friday. So, long story short, it is actually enrolled in the register. It's just we haven't gotten the Part 2 back yet. But that, like I said, that's a key piece to the funding of the project. So that's what we're moving forward with.
Any questions? Councilor Stone?
Just to clarify, the 5-year window that you currently have in the resolution would start upon an occupancy permit being issued, correct?
It start when?
Occupancy permit being issued. So that would be putting you in between, you said realistically 15 months,
Right.
15 to 18 months. From that time, then you'd be putting the 5-year window, and then you'd thinking about possibly extending it to another 4 years?
If that's what the council would like to do. It's not, you're not obligated to do that. That's something you can consider doing. If we were going to go in that direction, we would want to amend the resolution that's in your packet, because it doesn't say anything about that. Usually, if my memory serves me correctly, when we first started talking about adopting 79E, one of the measures of how many years you would provide is based on the amount of investment into the property. what Mr. Lacasse is proposing is approximately $7.3 million complete renovation of a building now that's going to be on the historical register, National Historic Register. So it is up to the council. We make these decisions based on each project that comes to the council. So what we authorize for Mr. Lacasse would be different for a different project. It would be based amount on the money invested into the property. Now, for clarity, the property, I think, is currently valued at 437 or something like that, thousand. Mr. Lacasse would pay the taxes on that assessed value until that 5-year period ends, or until the period that's extended ends. So you're not losing revenue. You're just, in a way, authorizing the investor to have more capital to work with so that he can make such a substantial investment. Did I explain that correctly?
And the city would not be capturing the increased value for that time period.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I had one other comment on the historic, there's a section of the statute regarding whether something meets that historic definition. And it says that a letter from the Historic District Commission, or if such local commissions are not established, a letter issued by the New Hampshire Division of Historic Resources that identifies any and all historic, cultural, architectural value of the structure or structures that are proposed. The application wouldn't be deemed complete, and governing bodies shouldn't schedule a public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry, this is for replacement. I was afraid if you were going to discuss that additional 4 years, that something else was necessary here, but I've got
We're
that
okay.
wrong. Yep.
Assistant Mayor Dameron.
Yeah, I have a question for Director Merrill, and I recognize there are various differences in the costs that have been applied to the different projects we've considered. But can you tell me how many projects we've granted 79E to?
You've granted 2. In one case, the covenant was recorded. In the other case, the party has decided not to record the covenant. It's determined to just keep it at full value and pay full value on it. But you have approved 2.
I've proved 2, but only one now is.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And are they both in the historic district?
Yes.
Okay.
There'll be more on this at your meeting on the 22nd, but currently you're limited to 79E to your historic district.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else?
No.
Councilor Kolaski?
First of all, thank you, Mr. Lacasse, for continuing to invest in the community. I don't have a lot of questions because I've followed this along at different levels. I couldn't be in support of an additional 4 years, given the fact the applicant hasn't asked for that this evening. And on top of that, it's been discussed between the city manager and Ms. Merrill prior to coming to us. So I wouldn't be in favor of that. But I am in favor of what's before us.
Any comments to Councilor Kolaski's? Assistant Mayor Dameron?
Yeah. Yeah, as rare as it may seem, I am in agreement with my brother councilor over here to my left.
That is weird. That is, we should hug.
No, we shouldn't. Too far. Too far.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Councilor Stone?
I'd actually like to see the number of years reduced to 3 years. Since the completion, that would be 5 years for an occupancy permit.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
And then we could revisit it at that time.
I don't think,
Don't think
Isn't
we
it
can-
I
under
don't
the
think
RSA, it's
that's-
up to 5 years?
yeah, up to 5 years. But once you,
once you
Is
set it.
funding dependent upon this?
Well, if I could comment, 5 years was granted on previous projects.
yeah,
And I mean, I don't know what the other project is, but just a correction too on the budget. I mean, it's a $7.5 million project. It's a pretty sizable investment into the city of Claremont, and I based the cash flow off of the 5 years, hoping for the 9, but based it off of the 5 years, kind of as a minimum, you know, for the investment. So, you know, that's respectfully, I'm requesting at least that, but.
Counselor Kolaski?
I'm just reminded that this is in the downtown TIF district, and we don't capture this increase for this period, which doesn't help the downtown TIF along, correct?
No, but what you're hoping is that type of investment's going to spur on other investment
know.
opportunities.
I know.
So,
I just,
yeah.
that's my, another part of me comfortable with 5.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody like to read the motion? Assistant Mayor Dameron?
You back up to the beginning. Resolution 2019-6, application for RSA 79E Community Revitalization Tax Relief Incentive for substantial rehabilitation of 54-62 Pleasant Street. Be it resolved by the Claremont City Council after a public hearing duly noticed that, whereas the City Council passed Resolution 2016-11 on July 22nd, 2015, adopting the provisions of RSA 79E Community Revitalization Tax Relief Incentive, and whereas on May 30th, 2018, the city received an application from Goddard Block Limited Partnership seeking property tax relief under the provisions of RSA 79E as incentive for substantial rehabilitation, for property located at 54-62 Pleasant Street, bracket the property. And whereas the property is located within the city's 79E incentive district as designated by Resolution 2016-11, and whereas Goddard Block Limited Partnership plans to invest approximately $7,376,463 to substantially rehabilitate the property into 36 apartment units and 10,000 square feet of retail space. Whereas the City Council has determined that the application has met the requirements of RSA 79E:14 and has determined that the construction cost for the proposed apartments shall not result in the use of state or federal grants or funds that do not have to be repaid, whereby such funds would total 50% or more of the project's construction cost. And whereas the City Council finds that the application satisfies all applicable provisions of RSA 79E and is eligible pursuant to RSA 79E:5, Roman 1, for a community tax relief incentive for a period of up to 5 years, beginning with the completion of the substantial rehabilitation of the property. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council hereby determines the proposed project has a public benefit in accordance with RSA 79E:7, Roman 1, 2, 2A, 3, and 4. And be it resolved, the City Council hereby or herein approves the application for tax relief for a period of 5 years per RSA 79E:5, Roman 1, commencing upon the completion of the substantial rehabilitation of the property as evidenced by the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. Be it further resolved that the granting of this community tax relief incentive is subject to the granting by Goddard Block Limited Partnership of a covenant acceptable to legal counsel in accordance with RSA 79E:8, ensuring that the property shall be maintained and used in a manner that furthers the public benefits for which the tax relief was granted, and such other requirements as are set forth in Resolution 2016-11. And be it further resolved that if the covenant is terminated for any reason, the city shall assess all current and arrears taxes to the owner as though no tax relief was granted, with interest in accordance with RSA Chapter 75, and be it further resolved that the city manager or his designees are hereby authorized to execute all documents and undertake all actions as may be required to implement this resolution. Majority vote required, dated this 8th day of August 2018, the city of Claremont, county of Sullivan, state of New Hampshire.
Is there a second?
Second that?
Okay, so that was read by Assistant Mayor Dameron, seconded by Counselor Pope. Since the resolution identifies the investment as 7.376 million, and you had just mentioned that it's more like 7.5, what is the correct number?
Does it, I mean, I don't have a hard, fast contract number. It's just our budget was 7.5, which probably changed from the time frame that we talked, but if I'm misunderstood, I thought it just had to be a minimum amount, and we've certainly met that threshold even with the increased budget.
I just wanted
kind
to
of
give you-
mentioned it as a point of, you know, mentioning the size of the investment, but.
I just wanted to give you the opportunity, if you want us to amend this resolution to reflect a $7.5 million investment, we can do that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I just want to be accurate, that's all.
Okay, yep.
So we'll amend that to 7.5.
Well, do we have to offer that by a motion to amend the motion that we've read?
Yes.
I move that we amend the dollar amount specified in the 1, 2, 3, 4th whereas, and change that number from 7,376,463 to 7.5 million.
Is there a second?
Second.
So that motion was made by Assistant Mayor Dameron, seconded by Councilor Kolowski. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. This is open for a public hearing, so before we take the vote, we'll have to open it up to the public for comment. Anybody from the public would like to speak to this? No? We'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the council. Any other further discussion before we take the vote?
I have one question.
Yes, Councilor Kolowski.
Ms. Merrill, does this overlap any other incentive zones that we have?
It is an economic revitalization zone.
So this
So that's
doesn't,
business taxes, so I'm not,
but nothing we're doing here would prohibit him from obtaining any other,
no.
okay.
Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the resolution passes. Thank you,
Okay, well,
Mr.
thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Merrill, if you could, just, I want to be, I just want to be sure that should we do this, and later on, if the council were to want to extend that beyond 5
Right.
years, could you
I'll-
find out?
I will. I'll take a look at it and see. I know that we have a responsibility to respond to the application in a certain period of time. I know that the tax period starts on completion, but I don't know if you can keep amending to add years and when that would stop. So I'll find out.
It'd be great, because reading the RSA didn't provide any guidance on that.
Not real clear.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.